What's going on, everybody, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast. I am, of course, your host who does the most, Ethan Smith. And yeah, we're coming at you with a Saturday episode. I was a little bit under the weather yesterday, so our typical episode with Adam Bittner from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette got moved back a day. So we're coming at you on the weekend. Hopefully you all are having a fun Saturday, staying warm, hopefully. It's below 40 in Savannah, so I can only imagine what it's like down there. But we're going to actually have a fun episode today. No CBA talk, no Hall of Fame talk, none of that. We're going to have a fun episode with Adam today where we're going to do some early predictions for the Pittsburgh Pirates and the 2022 season. Who's going to break out? Who should we look out for? Who's going to be the team MVP? How many wins are the Pirates going to have? We're going to go over all of that today on the Locked On Pirates podcast. And as always, I appreciate you all for making me your first listen of the day every single day. You can, of course, find this podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network wherever you find your podcasts. YouTube, Spotify, Odyssey, Google Play, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere you can find this podcast. You can find me. You can also find Adam's work over at the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, as always. And with all that said, guys, you know when the music hits, it's time to get real. So let's have a fun episode.
You are Locked On Pirates, your daily Pittsburgh Pirates podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Alrighty, everyone, and welcome back to the Locked On Pirates podcast as you're getting the double Twitter graphic from me right now, because boom, and it's still there. Hopefully everybody's having a good Saturday. I know the person to my right, Mr. Adam Bittner, is probably having a very good Saturday as well, sir, but how are you with everything that's been going on?
I'm all right. Unfortunately, I think I got a little bit of Saturday morning hair going on, so I apologize to the viewers on YouTube, but excited, going to be doing a little car shopping later.
Car shopping?
So, yeah. So that's,
don't worry, guys. Next thing Adam's going to be doing, he's going to be driving a Hellcat around town. Don't worry, guys.
It won't be anything exciting. Don't worry about that.
Hey, man, I'll believe it when I see it, when you are driving around some Range Rover or some really nice car, and then everybody's going to be like, hey, that's the guy from the Locked On Pirates podcast every Friday. But, Adam, I know it's cold outside, but me and you are inside doing this podcast today, thank God. And also, by the way, nobody ever knows that I have the morning hair because I always wear a hat. So everybody can just imagine what my hair looks like half the time because I always wear a hat on the podcast. But anyways, this is the Locked On Pirates podcast. Hope you all are, again, having a phenomenal weekend. And as I mentioned before, Adam, we're going to actually have a little bit of a fun episode. There's not a lot of fun news in baseball this week with everything that's happened. But early 2022 predictions for the Pirates. We'll see if we're getting a full season. I'm going to try to not mention that when we're mentioning a lot of this stuff. But this season has a little bit of promise, I think, before we get into it. But what are you most looking forward to with this 2022 team, and what kind of win range do you think that this ball club could be in for this entire year, depending on how long the season is?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, I still have some hope that the offseason is still incomplete because of the lockout, and that there will be some moves that, maybe add some interesting veterans to this mix who can, maybe help win a few more games, maybe become, decent trade pieces by the deadline. So I think, having said that, maybe that all of that hasn't been resolved yet, I'm kind of looking at 70 wins as, kind of a goal for this team, which I know doesn't sound like, much fun, but that would be, I think, an 8 or 9 win improvement, over 2021. And, looking at the moves that they've made, there's not a ton of reason to believe that that's going to come from anything other than the guys in the organization maturing and, the Pirates' own prospects kind of taking a small step toward respectability. I think if you just looked on paper and you got everything you got this year, you'd say this team's probably going to be just as bad this year as next. But, I think you're hoping for some development from some of these guys that, maybe they have a couple good weeks and they're a 70 to 75 win team. And maybe they avoid some of those series where it seems like they just get destroyed, by a team even as bad as the Reds. I think that's the goal. No more of that stuff. Be a little more competitive even in the games that you lose, and kind of shoot for that 70 to 75 win range. So I'll predict 70, the low end of that, because I think that would still be a pretty big improvement compared to where they were last year. But I still think that we got to see how the offseason unfolds.
Yeah, of course. And looking into it this year as well, I definitely think that people could look at the division that the Pirates are in right now. And for everybody that listened to it, I think I mentioned this with Connor Newcomb, the host of Locked On Orioles, because we were talking about the two rebuilds with those teams. And he was envious just because the Pirates and the Orioles are in very similar spots in their rebuilds. But it's pretty apparent that the NL Central is not even close to as good as the AL East. And I think that's going to play a big factor in the win-loss column this year, because I'd say the Brewers definitely took a step back. They didn't really do anything as of yet and can't do anything as of yet to really improve on what they did. So, I mean, I wouldn't say the Brewers got better. I wouldn't say they got really worse either, but I wouldn't say they got better. The St. Louis Cardinals, on the other hand, as well, didn't really get better either. I mean, there wasn't that much time to make moves. I understand that, and there still could be time to make moves, as you mentioned before, if things get figured out. But realistically, the Pirates may have gotten worse, per se, with the trades that they made and the people they got rid of, but nobody else in the division really got that much better. I mean, Cincinnati lost Nicholas Castellanos. I don't think he's coming back, so that's a big loss for them. The Chicago Cubs are still kind of in that limbo right now where they don't really want to compete, but they kind of do, if that makes sense. It's a weird spot. But as you mentioned about the maturity of the players that we have, I think one thing that's definitely going to benefit the Pirates heading into 2022 is something that was not a benefit last year, which was pitchers just got tired last year. And you only saw guys pitch, 4 innings maybe? Like, you got lucky if you got a 4 to 5 inning outing from a guy last year on the staff. But you have so many options to choose from this year if everybody comes into spring healthy. I mean, you're going to have Rouenzi Contreras at some point. You're going to have Miguel Yajure, who I think a lot of people in Pittsburgh forgot was actually having a decent outing with the Pirates last year before he got injured. And that's not even mentioning guys like Bryce Wilson, Zach Thompson, Mitch Keller, JT Brubaker. I mean, they're going to have plenty of options in the rotation, and I think that's going to really help them too. And, I mean, a lot of those guys could also shift to the bullpen as well. They could really make an impact there, and I think that's going to be the biggest impact, because if you look around the diamond, the hitting is not going to be exponentially better, I don't think, but I definitely expect some of the players around the diamond to have a better chance, especially inserting O'Neal Cruz into the lineup at some point. So I agree with you. I think most people would shy away from saying 70 wins is a major improvement, but at the end of the day, I mean, if you really look at 70 wins versus what they did last year, and that's assuming that we're having a full season, 70 and 92 for this team, to me, would be a good stepping stone heading into 2023, because then you're really talking about, hey, we've improved on our win total through the first 2 years of this. Why not go ahead at that point in next offseason, if we get 70, maybe even 72, 73 wins, add a couple more pieces from your prospect pool to the major league roster and in free agency, and with the state of the division, you could be talking about this team being a playoff team. Not this year,
I don't know.
next year.
Yeah, well, I don't know if I would go that far. I think, I would not fault anyone listening for being frustrated with, us talking about 70 wins like it's a big deal. Just because I think that's the frustrating part of this rebuild is that 2020, 2021, we're still possibly on the downslope here in 2022. They're not promised anything. We're not talking about this as an inevitability, but we're talking about it more of how, a rebuild should be looking to not end up like the Orioles, right? Where it just seems like they've been constantly rebuilding for years at this point. So, that's part of the frustration too, is that I feel your pain if you're out there listening and hearing 70 wins still seems miserable. And even by, historical standards, some of those Dave Littlefield teams were winning 75, 78, 79 games. They weren't good, but they weren't nearly as turgid and kind of feeling helpless in the middle of it. So, I think 70 wins would definitely be an improvement. Do I think that there was an alternative? Do I think that they could have, spent more money to make these teams better around these prospects? Absolutely. And I think that remains a reasonable criticism of this franchise, is that it's steering into, being as terrible as it can be. But this is where we are. And if you are signing up to be on the ride this year, then that's kind of the framework you have to look through. Is that it's not going to be a rocket ship to the moon here. It's going to take a while, and I think you're looking for that incremental improvement this year.
Yeah, of course. And a lot of that is going to come individually as well with that improvement. A lot of the individuals around this team are going to be a big part of that. And before we get into who can break out and those players that we could be looking for to help with that improvement, I'm going to let you guys all know about Built Bar. I feel like Adam needs a Built Bar sometimes. He's a really busy guy. I'm sure he could probably get them around here sometime. You never know. But Built Bar, of course, is the best tasting protein bar on the planet. They are absolutely phenomenal. You can go to Built.com right now, use our promo code LOCKED15 and get 15% off of your next order. Again, that is promo code LOCKED15. That's in all capitals for 15% off at BuiltBar.com. Built Bar, of course, they're 100% covered in real chocolate, and they have 130 calories, 4 grams of net sugar, 4 grams of net carbs, and 17 grams of protein. So they're not only phenomenal and good for you, but they're also very tasty as well. And they have so many different flavors: raspberry, cookies and cream, salted caramel, peanut butter brownie, and they're always coming out with new flavors all the time. So remember, go to BuiltBar.com, use the promo code LOCK15, and you will get 15% off of your next order when you invest in the best protein bars on planet Earth. I said planet Earth. I don't know what they got going on the moon and Mars right now, but you never know. Those Built Bars right now, they're good. They're phenomenal. They keep me up on it, honestly, when I'm doing everything I'm doing. And hopefully we're seeing a lot of these players in the offseason do what they have to do to break out in 2022. And Adam, I will let you go first on this. There's a lot of candidates to break out on this ball club right now. Some might not even be on the MLB roster. Some may be getting a chance to get on the MLB roster, and some are probably looking forward to a spring training to get on the roster. But who do you think can break out on this ball club and maybe help them take that next, minor step in this rebuild for this team to eventually compete again?
Yeah, it's it's hard for me to get a feel for who will break out, just because I feel like there weren't a ton of obvious candidates at the end of last season. I feel like everyone, kind of got to a certain performance level and basically stuck there for most of the year. Whether it was Brian Reynolds being great, whether it was Brian Hayes kind of taking a step back from his hot start in 2020, whether it was Mitch Keller with his good start, bad start stuff. You didn't see a ton of variation, so I think it's kind of hard to pick. So I'm going to go with, who do you want to see take a next breakout step? And I think it's got to be Mitch Keller, right? I mean,
Yes.
he's been the guy that you've been looking at to be the ace of this staff. To kind of not be Tyler Glasnow, to maybe take that Tyler Glasnow step while he's still in Pittsburgh and not after he's been traded to another organization. And I think this year's really pivotal for him, if he's going to become that pitcher, and if the Pirates are going to, hold on to him, because, how many more innings can you give a guy? It feels like we had these same conversations about Tyler Glasnow, and who knows, maybe Mitch Keller will follow the same trajectory, but I think he's going to get at least one more lap here, before the Pirates make any significant moves with him. So, I think this kind of has to be Mitch Keller's breakout season. Yeah. So I'm gonna pick him, not because I'm necessarily predicting it. I'm kind of in the boat of I'll believe it when I see it, but I think in terms of belief about this team competing sooner than later, he's a guy you need to turn out now. He's been at the big league level for a while. Mm-hmm. You have to have him established to then start to build around him. With Contreras and some of these other guys who are going to be coming up. So I think he's really, a very important piece of the season ahead where, even if it is, like we said, a 70-win, kind of a crappy season overall, I think you'll feel a lot better if he steps in and becomes, even like a 3.50 ERA guy. He doesn't have to be Cy Young, but just a consistent 3.50, 4 ERA guy who's going to give you the same kind of start night in and night out. So that's who I'm looking at.
And I agree with you 100%. I don't think anybody's really asking Mitch Keller to be Jacob deGrom. We're not asking you to be Max Scherzer. We're not asking you to be Corbin Burns. We're just asking you to be, for lack of a better comparison here, Zach Thompson. Zach Thompson was really an ideal pickup to me because I immediately said, okay, we got a pitcher from the Marlins. Let me go look at his ERA. And it was sub-4. I said, that's really all we want Mitch Keller to be, right? And the one thing that I will say about Mitch Keller is he's been up here for a while, yes. But if you look at his starts overall, he's really pitched about the equivalent of a year and a quarter, I would say, in the amount of starts that he's had. But I also still agree with you, though, 100%. Like, this is kind of the make or break year for him. And I think he knows that. I think he has to know that going into the year. And, yeah, I liked how you said it, too, though. You don't necessarily want, like, you don't, it's not like you want to see him. It's not like you, I'm trying to figure out the best way to describe this. You're saying you want him to break out for the betterment of the team, not necessarily saying, like, he's the only player that you hope breaks out, is the way I took that. And I'll also go with a pitcher as well, and I know this might be kind of a cop-out answer, but I think a lot of people forget that Rouenzi Contreras was a kind of just, like, polarizing figure for this team last year, and he played one game as a Pittsburgh Pirate. But when you're literally in Altoona all year and you have them coining every time you pitch Rouenzi Day, you're probably doing something really well. And I talked about this with Gary Morgan, one of our other guests. I said, I don't think he's going to start the year in Pittsburgh. I don't think there's just so many pitchers there right now. But as the season begins to unfold, and I'd say maybe around May or June, I definitely think you could see Rouenzi come up. Not saying he's going to garner Rookie of the Year conversation, but I definitely could see him have a lot of success and possibly break out. So he's kind of my cop-out answer, but another guy that I really want to see break out, just because I feel like it would help a lot, is Canaan Smith-Njigba. I hope they give him a chance, maybe as a fourth outfielder right at the beginning of the year. Just throw him out there and let him, be a kind of platoon guy, because I'm just going to be honest, I don't think Anthony Alford's the guy. I don't think Ben Gamble is a long-term option either. You're working with Brian Reynolds. And if Canaan Smith-Njigba, who I like a lot already, can break out, I think that would help the Pirates a lot, because then you also have Jack Sawinski, you also have Travis Swaggerty, you have other guys in the outfield as well that can help. But solidifying another spot in the outfield alongside Brian Reynolds, I think, would go a real long way. Canaan Smith-Njigba, his bat plays well already. I think he can be a phenomenal fielder. I think they'd probably put him in right or left field, depending on what they want to do. And at the end of the day, I think a lot of people forget with a lot of these young outfielders, I want to see all of them break out. I love outfielders. Outfield is like my favorite position to watch in baseball, even though I never played it when I played baseball. Outfield is always my favorite position to see guys break out, because some of the best players in the league are outfielders. But at the end of the day, I think people also forget, too, that there's a lot of movement that you can do with that outfield. We saw Brian Reynolds do very well in the outfield last year, Gold Glove finalist as a center fielder. But I think people forget that he can move to the corners. That's where he started. And not a lot of people thought he was going to be a center fielder. And you could really see them get very creative with the outfields that they have, and I think a breakout from Canaan Smith-Njigba would do just that. And I'm not saying Jack Sawinski can't break out either. I just think Canaan Smith-Njigba is probably the guy that I would look out for as a breakout candidate to really help this ball club, like we mentioned before, get over that little hump and maybe get to that 70-75 win mark.
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of a different idea in terms of process. Like I think, if you think Smith-Njigba is an impact prospect, I think you want to keep him down, playing every day for as long as you can. And then I think you want him, to hopefully push out an Anthony Alford or, Ben Gamble played pretty well last year. Maybe he's not someone who's immediately on the chopping block, but you ultimately want him to, force his way into the lineup from the minors, I think. And I think you want to keep him down there for Super 2 status. And again, that's we've talked about on this podcast about maybe there are some guys who, are not on the roster, or prospect roster, who are guys that the Pirates are going to treat with kid gloves. Maybe they're, in that B, C level prospect range that have a great training, spring training and come up if we have spring training. If they can come up and maybe have a couple hot months. and maybe become players, kind of like a Garrett Jones type of situation. But yeah, I think that we're talking about process here. We're not talking about the end result, which is that I think you would want to hopefully have some more consistency and a clearer future for that outfield by the end of the year. Seeing that some of these pieces can fit there. And so I definitely, agree on that front that's something you want to see.
Oh, yeah, of course. And before we get into our final part of our podcast today, where we're going to pick our team MVPs and who to look out for in that process, we're going to do one for position players and one for pitcher for the MVPs. Before we get into that, though, I want to let you guys know about the wonderful people over at betonline.ag. BetOnline would like to wish you a happy new betting year as we continue our march to the playoffs and beyond. BetOnline remains the number one spot for all the best sports wagering action in 2022. It's a new year and a new updated desktop and mobile website on betonline.ag that allows you to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just make sure you use our promo code LOCKEDON in all caps to get started. From football, basketball, hockey, and your favorite Vegas casino games, make sure that you go use betonline.ag for all of your betting needs in 2022. BetOnline, of course, is the best place to do all of your betting and where the game starts. Make sure you go to betonline.ag today. Go win yourself some money. You never know. Go bet on the Chiefs. Go bet on whoever. I don't know. I really don't care who wins the NFL playoffs at this point. But if you do, go make some money on betonline.ag. And again, make sure you use that promo code LOCKEDON to receive your 50% welcome bonus. Team MVP, or MVPs, if you want to say it, because we're going to do a position player and a pitcher, and who to look out for in that spot. Now, again, I will let you go first as well. You could do both if you want to. I'd say you could pick your position player and your pitcher. But who do you have as probably your prediction for the team MVP in 2022 for both spots?
Well, I think the obvious one's Brian Reynolds, so I'll leave that for you. Excuse me. And I'm going to say keep Brian Hayes, stepping up with the bat a little bit, getting some of those wrist issues behind him. I don't know if we're ever going to see him consistently play like, 2020 Brian Hayes and when he was so hot coming up. I don't know if we're ever going to see that from him again, but I don't think he needs to be that to be, a phenomenal player for this team. He can be a 280, 290 hitter with a little bit of pop, not a ton. And with that glove, I think he can just be the most impactful player, in both facets of the game. So I'm gonna pick him to kind of get back to that level. To kind of be, a powerful force in that lineup, that makes everyone around him a little bit better. So I'm going to go with him on that front, and then I'm going to take the cop out and say David Bednar on the pitching front. I think it's tough to predict what relievers are going to do on a year in year out basis. But I think he's really rounding into being that next guy in the bullpen who the Pirates have kind of always had, even, in good times and bad times. They've kind of always had that shutdown guy. And I think that's the step you want to see him take this year. If he's going to be a long-term piece. I know there's been some talk that he could be traded, and I guess that could still happen at any time. But for now, I'm going to operate under the assumption that he's going to be here and he's going to be, that bullpen piece that you can build around. So, I'm gonna go with those for my two picks.
Well, for lack of creativity, I definitely agree. Brian Reynolds and Key Brian Hayes, position player wise, probably the two guys you're going to look at for team MVP on that front. If I had to name another one, it's kind of tough just because I don't know how long he'll be a MLB player in 2022. But O'Neal Cruz could definitely fight for that too. I just think the fact that he had one of the highest exit velocities that we've seen in baseball since that was like a statistic, and he played a weekend of baseball last year, is nuts. And I think he's only going to get better. He's literally a giant. He's 6'7". I mean, I would stand next to him and look like a miniature pop figure, and I'm like 5'9", 5'10". So I'm not exactly short, but he's almost a foot taller than me. His bat plays well, and I think if he can improve his fielding, I definitely think he has the opportunity to be like an all-around shortstop. I think he's fine at that position. I don't think he needs to move. I think he could compete for that. It's just lack of knowing how long he's going to be on the MLB roster. Pitcher, I already named him earlier. I think he's going to come over here, and I have two options for this one, and are both guys that we acquired in the past calendar year. The first is Zach Thompson, who we picked up from the Jacob Stallings trade. Everything that I see from Zach Thompson, there's one word that I like to use when looking at him, and it's consistency. He kind of got buried in that rotation in Miami just because, I mean, he had Sandy Alcantara. He had a lot of guys over there that were just Pablo Lopez, another guy to name from the Marlins pitching staff. There's a lot of guys there that were having very good years, and I think that he just kind of got lost in that shuffle, like to the point where you didn't even really notice that he had a sub-4 ERA last year, I believe. So I think he's going to come in, not saying that he's going to be the number one, because I think that job is going to belong to a JT Brubaker or a Bryce Wilson. But I think Zach Thompson definitely has a chance to be the best pitcher on this staff at some point if he can bring from what he learned in Miami and be a real middle-of-the-rotation guy every single time that he pitches. And I think he's going to stay around that same ERA as well. And another guy that I think is only going to more than improve than he did last year is Bryce Wilson. Those are kind of the two guys that I'm looking at, just to not name Dave Bednar. I don't want to make this whole segment where it's like, oh yeah, me and Adam just agree, like these are going to be the guys. I loved what I saw from Bryce Wilson last year. I think people definitely forget how young Bryce Wilson is. He's a very young pitcher, looked good last year, and much like Zach Thompson, he was buried in a very good rotation in Atlanta. It was just one of those things. And baseball is a sport like that. Sometimes you get buried in the rotation. You end up getting traded in a trade, which I already said the Pirates won that trade already, no matter what Bryce Wilson turns into, because Richard Rodriguez just couldn't find the magic he had early on in the season in Atlanta. And if I am mistaken, I don't even think he was on the World Series roster. So no. They definitely, they won that trade already, I would say. And again, is Zach Thompson, who I already mentioned earlier, has a very good season with the Pirates this year in 2022. I think they won the Jacob Stallings trade. That might not be a big thing, but when you virtually created Jacob Stallings into Roberto Perez, Zach Thompson, and the other prospects that they picked up, that already looks like a good trade on paper to me. I understand we all like Jacob Stallings, and he was really good, but I would look at Bryce Wilson and Zach Thompson and say, hey, both of these guys are young, and both of them have a lot of promise, and their ERAs speak to it. Bryce Wilson, I think, a little bit less, because, of course, the team was just not very good offensively last year. And I think that's going to be a big play on team MVPs, especially pitcher-wise. Can they get the offensive backing this year that they didn't get last year? That's going to be one of the biggest questions I think they have into 2022. I don't know your thoughts on it yet, but I mean, I don't know if we're going to get that just yet. But it also depends on what the lineup is going to look like day in and day out, especially with some departing names that we saw in this offseason. But already, we've seen that they've kind of put an emphasis on saying, we're going to have a lot of position players that are going to be ready, and if your bat plays, it's going to be hard to take you out of the lineup. Same thing with pitchers. I mean, there's a lot of pitchers, as I mentioned earlier, but if Bryce Wilson, Zach Thompson, and some of these younger guys, if their ERA is low and they're giving you 5 innings every single outing, it's going to be hard to take them out of the rotation.
Yeah. But I think, there's also a level on which, we're imagining a world where everything works out, and we just know that that's not going to happen either. So I think if they get one of those two guys that you were talking about to be a consistent force in this rotation, I think that's a win. I think that should be the goal. If both of them turn out, and I'm talking about Mitch Keller over here, all of a sudden that looks like a real great rotation if they all do what we think that they could or should do. But then the other side of that is, well, this team's going to be a lot better than we think it is. And I'm not necessarily quite there yet. But I do think if certainly one of those two guys that you talked about can prove it over a whole season, and not just, come in and play a portion of the schedule and look good. Because, the Pirates have had a lot of guys who've kind of looked like that at different times in the past couple of years. Granted, 2020 was kind of disrupted. So if you had a good month, it was almost like you had a good year. So, I think that's the ideal, right? And if you're the Pirates, I think you would settle for, maybe one or two of those starters taking that step until into consistency, and then maybe next year you have a third guy kind of join them, and then maybe you're cooking with gas a little bit, but. I also am, like I said, I'll believe it when I see it with some of these guys. And there's there's a reason that they're here too. There's a reason that they were picked up in trades. Yes, they were buried, but that also meant that their organization saw flaws in them too. So it's also a question of can the Pirates work out those flaws? Is this development regime all that it's been hyped up to be to us? I mean, that's pretty much what you're pinning your hopes on in this, in terms of this organization being different than the Neil Huntington days, is that that they can take some of these younger players, not just like an Edinson Volquez or an AJ Burnett, and professional type guys who'd had success before, fallen on hard times, that the Pirates were able to rehab. The Huntington regime was never able to make trades for the Bryce Wilson types, for the most part, and kind of make them, important pieces of the organization. So if you believe in the development regime, I think those are certainly guys to watch to see can they take a step under Ben Cherington's, the whole staff that he's set up.
Oh yeah, of course. And that's probably the biggest question heading into 2022 is how is this team going to develop, and is it going to be for good or is it going to be for bad? Well, I'll let you guys mull on that question as we end today's episode. Adam is always a fun guy to have on the podcast. We know that. Thank you for making us your first listen of the day every single day on the Locked On Pirates podcast. You can follow me on Twitter at MVP_Ethan or at Locked On Pirates. Make sure you follow Adam at FujiMaster24. That's with a G, not a J. And Adam, what do you got going on over there at the Post pretty soon? Anything fun going on right now?
Yeah, I'll be writing about West Virginia basketball on Monday, doing a quick check-in on them. They got a big game today against Arkansas. Then I'll be checking in with a couple of Pittsburgh nurses who are also playing lacrosse for Robert Morris. They're pulling double duty, in the middle of a pandemic. So a couple of impressive women there who I'm going to talk to, and that'll probably be in our goodness section next weekend. So keep an eye out for that. And as always, keep an eye on Jason Mackey and Mike Persak for whatever Pirates news might pop up in the next couple of months as the CBA is being worked out. We're at post-gazette.com. Please consider subscribing because it helps us do the journalism we love to do.
Of course, and honestly, shouts out to those ladies being nurses and lacrosse players, kind of channeling their inner Britt Baker over there right now with her being a dentist and a pro wrestler, Gotta love to hear that stuff, and that's the kind of stuff that the Post always posts. Haha, no pun intended, sorry. But thank you guys so much for an awesome episode coming at you on Saturday. Hopefully everything is good. Hopefully you have a fun weekend, and I will be back on Monday, and we will see you on the flip side.